So I'm Amy Getz. I'm the Manager of Community College Services at the Dana Center. I'm going to be giving a brief overview of some of the work that we're doing at the Dana Center in Texas, not as this is what everyone should be doing, but as sort of a case study to illustrate, to have something in mind, something concrete as an example to be thinking about as you start to think about your own work. So first, I do want to connect back to what Uri spoke about the importance and the primacy of faculty in this work, but also moving into this systemic level of work. So a personal anecdote. 4 years ago, I was sitting in an office in one of the most beautiful places in the world, Durango, Colorado, as a math faculty member, had a wonderful department, just the right size of school where we could really do good work in our school and not have a bunch of people fighting us, and a lot of independence, the great parts of being a faculty member. I got to go out and have those moments of this, I helped this student today, and then we could talk in our department, we could work on improvement and have that sense that we were making a difference, moving forward, improving things for students. And then I made the mistake of going to a conference and hearing Uri Treisman speak. And now I'm living in Texas. And on the downside, I haven't spoken to a student in 2 years, so I have gotten a little removed from that. But what brought about this dramatic change in my life was this idea that, as wonderful and powerful as it is to be in that position to impact the one student, or even maybe students on a departmental level, is we have a real crisis in this country that is affecting hundreds of thousands of students. And to be able to make changes at that scale, I think requires all of us to start to think about our roles differently. And not that I would not want any of you to ever lose sight of the student in front of you, because that's got to be your most important role. But that all of us also have to start thinking about what this means on a national scale. Because probably the greatest challenge of our work is to figure out how we as the Dana Center act as the catalyst and the connector that helps us take the amazing power of faculty and channel that and support it and amplify it to create change at scale. So the work that we are building around that concept is called the new Mathways project. So I'm going to use this as an example to think about when we talk about these dimensions of systemic change, what that can look like. Because the challenge is really moving beyond just the tinkering on the edges, or just working on delivery, just maybe changing content a little. It really does mean we have to do more than that. So in thinking about this, when you think about Texas as a state, of working across a state like Texas, that's amazing. That's like, a whole country in many parts of the world. And maybe it should be. They think they are. Yes, they're still in that mud. So, first of all, this cannot be that magic bullet. This is not an idea that you just say, okay, we are all going to do one thing, we're all going to do it alike, and it's going to solve all of our problems. First of all, it would never get off the ground, and it wouldn't work. Even in a single college, there is too much diversity to try to deal with these problems with a single solution. So our approach has been to set 4 basic principles of reform that the state agreed to. And when I say the state agreed to this, what we were able to do was get the unanimous support of the Texas Association of Community Colleges, which is the organization that represents all of 50 college districts in Texas. So all 50 presidents and chancellors voted unanimously to support this project, actually put money into the project, and to help us make this happen at the campuses. If we had just done that, if it had just been the presidents are going to decide to do this, now go, it's going to be done, it would not work. The other pieces of that preparation were working with faculty, using faculty ideas to create the overall structure and vision for the work. So this is when we talk about working at all levels of the system, it's working throughout those levels and getting the buy-in and support and the input from the people through all those levels. So the 4 principles. This first one gets at what Uri talked about content, is that there should be multiple pathways connected to programs of study, open to all students, not to a select few students in a special program, not to students who come in at the college level, but to all students, including developmental ed students. Our second principle, it addresses the course sequence, is that we need to find appropriate ways to accelerate students to and through college level mathematics. Again, not a single way to do that. Co-requisites is one way. Shortening the sequence of developmental education is another. Using modularization and self-paced programs when appropriate. It's about finding the right strategies that work for the right students, but not, again, just making that to be for a small group, making this the normative practice so that the majority of students are moving through their developmental and gateway mathematics courses much more quickly than they have been in the past. Third, this is going along with the student supports, is that we need to make intentional use of strategies that support students as learners, and they need to be integrated and aligned with our academic courses. The fourth one is about faculty supports. And that we need to be using rigorous and evidence-based curriculum design and pedagogy in the classroom. And this is the part that's about us pushing ourselves to provide the evidence of what we're trying to, that not just saying we do it because we like it, but because we know it works. And this gets at faculty supports and delivery. This gets looking at the issues like what works in an online platform, in an online course delivery system. What works in an in-class? Who does it work for? Really understanding the practices that supports our work. So this is a huge challenge, as we just talked about. How can faculty alone do this work? Where do you address the articulation issues? How does that get started? All of this is a huge challenge for individual colleges. They don't have the capacity, typically, or the resources, or the political power to do this on their own. Because what it takes is developing new curricular materials that can be used at a large scale, that can be used by adjuncts, by the people with the least support, with the least training. It takes training for that, the faculty, and it's not just faculty, it's staff, it's advisors, it's tutors, it's every program you have on your campuses that supports students in mathematics courses, trio programs. It's all of the ancillary supports that we often forget about when we talk about curricular reform. And it's the external policy issues. This gets at articulation, placement, these challenges that as an individual college, it's very, very hard for you to address. So that's why at the Dana Center, we're advocating so strongly for state and regional work, state and regional efforts that somehow bring people together, bring the colleges together to create both the political power and the resources to really make change at scale. So just to describe this to you of how this is working in Texas, is the Dana Center is acting as sort of the central location for the work, but we're doing that in partnership with colleges, with the TAC, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, partnership with our state policy boards, and with the various other organizations and initiatives that support reform in the state. So at that high level, through all of those partnerships, we're working on policy work. So this question about articulation, where does it start? Well, we're starting as the seed of the discussions, but then we're bringing in four-year colleges and universities. We're just getting people in the same room as a starting point. We're starting to gather data. In Texas, all of the articulation are based on local articulation agreements, and so there's a lot of mythology out there right now about what is and is not allowed at this institution or that institution. So we're just starting by compiling the data, getting the real information, and getting it into people's hands so they actually know what the real context is on the ground at the moment. In our situation, that's been huge. I think this is where looking at what is happening in your region is important, because you may be in a different situation. You may have that information in a more available form. Some places do. Some places have more statewide consistency than we do. So we're, first of all, figuring out, well, what is the real situation? And then we're going out and we're giving that information to getting the community colleges and the four-year colleges to look at it together, and starting to talk about, well, what are the steps we can take to address the problems that students are facing as they try to move from institution to institution. None of this could be done if we didn't have these connections that we bring we bring the University of Texas system with us. Through the system office, they have connections to like the A&M system and the Texas State system. So it's just this ever-expanding field of partnerships that we have to all pull these people in and start to get them to work together. Then we have the role at the institutional level, because there's a whole different set of challenges at the institutional level. There's challenges for the registrars. How do these courses, I mean, it gets down to how do we code these courses? What does this change in our data collection systems? Again, the advising. So working with all of those different levels of the system to start to predict, plan ahead, look for where there are challenges, look for where there are opportunities, and move through this forward as a system, not as just a little isolated pilot that everybody can ignore because it's really so small it doesn't affect the rest of the college. And then our role at the faculty and classroom level. So this is where we sort of looked at what was needed in the field. There's a lot of people doing co-requisite models. There's some good examples out there. It sort of felt like people were at least starting to figure that out. But people were really struggling with this idea of what about students who aren't really the right ones to go into co-requisites? They're coming in with lower skills. They're not quite ready to be put into that college level course. Or maybe they don't really know which college level course they should be going into. So we've decided, based on that need assessment, to build curricular materials around a year-long pathway model that I'll talk more about. Again, not saying that's the only model people should be using, but it happened to be the model where we felt like there was a real need in the field for some good materials. Like, people were calling us saying, we're trying to do this, can you help us? Can you help us change the content at the same time as structure? So this is the tools that seem to be needed by the field. Along with that are the professional learning services and opportunities and materials that faculty need in order to adjust to a new type of course, again with strong pedagogy, new design. So these are services that we're developing so that this really will be something that can be scaled beyond just a few faculty members in an individual institution. And I just want to stress this last point, that again, this whole idea of working throughout the system means that we want all of this work to be informed by faculty. So working closely with faculty on input on what these courses should look like, what the materials should look like, what the services should look like, working with advisors about what kind of information advisors really need, working with IR people to figure out what they need. So this is an iterative process that tries to draw on the expertise of the field without overburdening the field with the full responsibility for development. So again, Texas is a special challenge in more ways than one. And one of them is the size. 50 community college systems, and when we say systems, you know, that includes Austin Community College, which has 11 campuses, and then other systems that have multiple colleges within their system, but a lot of independence, and then very, very small rural colleges with one campus. So the 50 is almost, doesn't really quite capture the scale. So we can't work with all of them at the same level, and they're not all ready to work at the same level. So we've started with a core group of 9 co-development partners, and they're the ones who are really helping us frame these materials and services and make sure we end up with high quality work that can be useful to the field. And then we have active learning sites, which are the colleges that are looking to implement in a few years, and capacity building sites who are really just at the information stage, that they need to start getting information to their faculty, start building support, and they will be implementing in 3 to 5 years. So that's sort of the background. That's the context in which we're working. These are the materials we're actually developing. And again, this is just an example to kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about. And because this is hard to read in your slides, we also had a handout that had it as a full page. So one of the challenges, if any of you are familiar with our original work with Statway and Quantway in partnership with the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, that original model, the concept was, you got these developmental students coming in about the intro to algebra level, get them right into statistics, make it a year-long pathway, get them right into a quantitative reasoning strand, make that a year-long pathway, so they're really connecting to that engaging material right away. Well, there's a lot of power in that model. And in some instances, it's probably still a very powerful and appropriate model for certain colleges where students come in really knowing they're headed in a certain direction. But the input we got from many colleges was, but those students, we're talking about developmental students, these are the least prepared students, these are the students who had the least vision of how they fit into college, what their options are. They may say they're going to be an engineer, but they don't know what that means. So we have revised our model to have this common starting point here. So again, this is about the intro to algebra level, and I say about because we expect to refine our placements as we get this work out into the field and start gathering data, but we're starting with this assumption that we're talking about intro to algebra students. They come in at a common starting point with a course that is a quantitative reasoning-based developmental course, which is a kind of a revolutionary concept in itself, because all of our developmental courses have been about algebra. So this is a shift. And Uri talked about how we think about this as we looked at, well, what are common content and skills that are important for all mathematics pathways? What do students really need to know very, very well that will help them be successful no matter where they go? And we came up with numeracy, strong estimation, understanding orders of magnitude, really being fluent with numbers. Proportional reasoning, huge, incredibly important no matter where you're going in mathematics, whether it's quantitative reasoning, statistics, or into calculus. Basic algebraic reasoning. So we are not saying algebra is not important. Because I know in my little math teacher heart, I get a little worried right now when it seems to be there's a whole political movement that just wants to throw algebra out the door. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we need to be really careful about what we think and prioritize of the importance of algebra. So we're looking at students really need to understand what variables mean and how to work with them. And they need to have a level of comfort with that, a fluency with variables. They need to be able to solve basic equations. And they need to be able to make sense of algebraic models. So there's a strong emphasis on modeling, on the idea of when you see an equation of a line, can you make sense of what that slope really means, what the interpretation of it is, versus using the point slope formula to write the equation of the line. That's sort of the comparison I make between algebraic reasoning versus a more manipulative, traditional algebraic focus. And also, prioritizing things like linear and exponential are both really important in the world. They're important in many of our, what I call the citizenship skills, understanding things like population growth, a lot of financial information, has a lot to do with exponential. But think back to our math, we teach quadratics first. So we're reprioritizing exponential over quadratic, making those kinds of decisions about what the content should be. And then the other thing that's included in this Foundations of Mathematical Reasoning is more about data analysis and descriptive statistics than you would see in a traditional algebra curriculum. Starting to really lay the foundation for understanding the complexity of graphics that we see today. Pick up USA Today. There are graphics in there that it'll take me 10 or 15 minutes to figure out. And work, and I hope I figure it out right. I mean, there is a complexity here that we have just as a society assumed everybody knows that, but they don't. And then Uri was referencing things like medical statistics, understanding risk. There are studies that show most doctors do not understand risk statements, and they give incorrect information to their students because of it. And it's not because this is complex mathematics, it's because it's a complex situation using percentages. So this concept that it isn't about the rigor of the mathematics in terms of how far it is down the scale on our list of course sequences, but the rigor of the context in which it's taught is really at the heart of this quantitative reasoning, beginning first point and then into our college level course in quantitative reasoning. And it also, it continues to form the foundation for the college level quantitative reasoning course over here. So the Foundations of Mathematical Reasoning, we say 4 contact hours because sometimes colleges need a little flexibility in how they handle that, but we want the students in the classroom. These are classroom-based courses in our original design, so we want the students in those classrooms for 4 contact hours. The Statistical Reasoning course, we recommend, again, it be a 4 contact hour course. For some colleges, That's a problem. One of the things we keep saying to people is we recognize that we are not going to control what you do with any of our work. You have to make local decisions, and we cannot and we should not make those decisions for you. So we try to design and give the best recommendations we can about what will help students be the most successful, and then locally, people are going to have to modify to meet their local needs. So these are the developmental courses. So in the key of this, the things that have the little dots on it, we say non-transferable because college level developmental it can be very different in different places, but at least in Texas, the way that the system is set up, this top foundational mathematical reasoning is still developmental. Right. Just like Intro to Algebra would be. So then this is paired with this frameworks course, which is, we loosely describe it as a student success course because that helps people kind of picture it, but we really stress that this course is based, again, on what we know best from the research about the attitudes, skills, beliefs that students need to be successful, college students, but we pair it with the math course so that students are getting some special support with being successful math students. And the other important piece of this, if you think back to what Uri was talking about student supports being separated from the academic world, is that these two courses are integrated so that there are materials in the foundations course, the math course, that reinforce and help students apply what they're learning in that student success course. And in fact, then that goes on through the college level courses, the second semesters, so that this isn't something that students go over here and they learn their student success good strategies and they never see it or think about it again. I'm sometimes just amazed how naive we are if we think about our own learning. If any of you have tried to change a habit or really build a skill that was kind of different from what you'd done before, it takes time and it takes reinforcement. So through this system, we believe that these students really need to have some strong reinforcement of those ideas, those concepts, those skills throughout this year. So after, the other piece of that student success course is that there is a strong support for students to learn about and make an informed choice about their career path and their academic path. And they come out of that course with a career plan and an academic plan. So the reason remember I talked about that we originally started with, let's just put everybody into statistics or into quantitative reasoning from the very beginning, and we realized that was naive, that wasn't the real situation on the ground. These students need this opportunity to get some very intensive advising through the process of this course. So it's not just sitting down with the advisor for 5 minutes, it's working with this faculty member who knows them to learn about their options and to make an informed decision. And then to connect that with the mathematics pathway that they're going to select. So that then helps them decide which of the 3 pathways they'll go on. That's when they make that decision. So the quantitative reasoning, I talked about the statistics, I think everyone's clear about that. So the STEM prep pathway, this is that track that we have now, the college algebra, pre-calculus, but we've changed the name because first of all, we want to change how people think about it. Is we recognize that, again, maybe those courses are based more right now on what we've just always done. They're based on history versus what we really know now about what it takes to be successful in calculus. So there's a dotted line around the box because this is the pathway that we think is actually the most challenging to develop. And it's the one that we are putting, so what we're doing is we're giving ourselves more time to get there. So yes, it's dotted because it's a little bit vague. We think it might take 2 semesters or 2 terms. And depending on the system, part of that might still have to be developmental math. Uri always wants me to be very careful when I talk about this and say, we are figuring this out. In a year, we plan for next year to start doing some really focused work with faculty, with researchers on figuring this out. And in a year, we may come back and say, you know what, we have a slightly different model now. But our goal is to prepare students for calculus so they are successful in calculus and be able to do it in less time than that. Now it's sort of intro to algebra, intermediate algebra, college algebra, pre-calculus. That's 2 years of math before they get to calculus. And in some places it's longer. It really varies from system to system how that sequence is set up. But we do hope to have that down to at least 1.5 years. And one of the things I really like to talk to math faculty about with the STEM prep pathway is to think about how your college algebra and pre-calculus classes would be different now if you knew the students in there were really going to calculus. And they knew they were going to calculus, and they knew why they were going to calculus. Because our hypothesis is this is really going to change the culture of those classes, of those courses. And it's going to mean that college algebra no longer has to serve everybody and therefore serve no one very well. And we can really focus the content and the teaching on the students that need that particular content. So the frameworks course, we strongly recommend that this course be offered for college credit. In Texas, that can be done as a psychology or an education credit because it does have this strong research base. It's not just the, well, let's get together and, kind of talk about some note-taking skills. There is rigorous college level content in this course. And so research really shows that these courses are most successful when they're offered for college credit. So we strongly recommend that. And that's why here, this is, we have course numbering from Texas, and it's listed as either an education or a psychology course. So they're boxed together because they're taken concurrently, but one would be developmental credit and one college level credit. Now, we have some colleges that say they can't do that. We want to push them on that. We want to get them to the college level. But there are colleges that could choose to offer the Student Success course for developmental credit. Again, while we're designing it to be connected to a math course, I think many, many colleges will find these resources will influence all of their either first-year experience or Student Success course, or however they talk about that course that really brings students into the campus, engages them, and helps them prepare for success. But some colleges have some great programs out there. And again, as Uri said earlier, don't kill off what works. Yeah.
Couple of questions. Do all students take the foundations of mathematical reasoning? And if not, how do they get to the other courses? And the second question is, I forget what it was. Do all students go into the foundations of mathematical reasoning regardless of their reading abilities?
Okay, two good questions. So, yes, I mean, we envision that, I guess all students is a little loose, but all students that are coming in at that placement level can go into the foundations. Again, there may be some reasons for colleges to have some other structures in place. Some colleges have, really strong, narrowly focused programs in like a technical field or something, and students come in, they really know they're going in there, they have a high success rate. If that's working for students, then they should continue to do that, in my opinion. That would be a local decision. But we want to build this to hit a broad spectrum of students. So we're designing this to be something that it would help students kind of wherever they are in their process. If they're at the developmental level. If they're college level, then they should be going into the college level courses. And if they're close to college level, maybe a co-requisite is a better option. So we really do think it's important to take nuanced look at your different populations and decide who is appropriate for what. And then the second question about reading level, we get this a lot. Because that foundations course is a quantitative reasoning course, some people define quantitative reasoning, or quantitative literacy is another term that's used, as the intersection of mathematics and language. And so there's a lot of language, there's a lot of reading, there's a lot of writing. But we do not recommend a prereq of reading, other than like the very, very lowest level. If somebody's at the very, very lowest level of reading, they probably need to get into a reading class first. But for sort of the largest proportion of students that are coming in having both joint needs in reading and writing, or reading and math, it's early research. It's definitely not definitive, but there's early research showing that students can be successful in these courses if the curricular materials are designed well, and if they're receiving support in the classroom to address the reading and writing skills. So we're trying to build that into our curricular design. And that's also true for the frameworks course, that again, early research shows that students in a college level, well-designed frameworks course can be successful even if they have developmental reading needs. I think we also would really advocate for more nuanced placement based on multiple measures. If I were an advisor in my Amy's ideal world, if I'm sitting there as an advisor and I have this person who comes in and says, I want to be a nurse. I know I want to be a nurse because I've volunteered in a hospital. I really understand the program. I know why I'm doing it, in a conversation, that all of this comes out. And that student is maybe at the lower end of intermediate algebra, but they're really motivated. They have high cognitive skills. They have those the non-content based. Maybe their math is a little shakier, but they know where they're going, they know why they're going there, and they're motivated. Then that student probably is ready for a college level course with support, the co-requisite model. I could see a student with higher math skills, but doesn't have the faintest idea what they're really doing. This is all brand new. They sort of stumbled over college and decided to go yesterday, and now they're in advising today. I think that student, despite maybe slightly higher skills, maybe needs that foundations course. But this is where our field, it needs to be not just my gut reaction as an advisor. We need to start building better data and evidence for who is successful and how we can start to identify people for whom acceleration really works and those that need more support. So that's sort of the ultimate dream, hopefully. But it's gonna take us a while to get there. And so right now that's why we still talk about it sort of in the terms of our current placement strategies. So when I'm talking, because I know there are a number of math faculty in here, there are some issues, and some of them have already been raised, that come up when we talk about this. One is, are we lowering rigor? It was very interesting. One time I got cornered after one of these presentations by a faculty member who said, well, which would you rather have? You're in the hospital. Do you want a nurse that passed college algebra, or do you want a nurse that went through this program? And at my old school, we worked really hard to make college algebra relevant and to the world, and I think we had a darn good college algebra course, but I can't say I thought that course would make somebody a better nurse. And most of the college algebra courses I've seen out there, I know wouldn't make anybody a better nurse. But in these courses, in this foundations course, for example, what we're trying to do is stress critical thinking, decision making, questioning when you get an answer that doesn't seem to make sense. I think I want that nurse. You know, I do. I want the nurse who will ask a question and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I think I want a nurse that has been taught to think on their own and think independently and not just follow a bunch of rote steps because that's what someone told her, him to do. So it is a change for us. It's a shift. And I think for a long, long time, mathematics has been measured in its rigor by how many variables and obscure symbols were on the page in the textbook. And the more obscure symbols you got on the page, the more rigorous it was. And we do have to step back and ask ourselves the question of, can we achieve rigor? Can we challenge people with content that is based on simpler mathematics, but more complex context? And I won't go into it now. I can talk forever on this, and I know you don't want to hear it, but there is evidence out there that shows we are graduating a whole lot of people who went through our current course requirements for math who don't have good quantitative reasoning skills, who can't pick up a newspaper and make sense of the data that they read in it. So I think we also have to ask the question of how are we doing now? And the second thing I hear from faculty is I want them to learn the beauty of mathematics. Well, I know, I've been there, and I also have to ask again, how are we doing with that? I don't think a lot of students are coming out of our developmental courses thrilled with the beauty of mathematics and overwhelmed by it. You know, we're not doing that very successfully. So I still think we should be striving to achieve the goal that students will appreciate mathematics. But I think we have to put ourselves in their heads and remember they don't have the perspective of, yeah, factoring is just fun because it's just fun. And what I see with students when I started shifting this content is that when they saw value in their lives for mathematics, that sparked their interest and appreciation. That got them excited about mathematics. So that's the twist, is thinking about it from their side. So if you look in your slides, we have a timeline for development and implementation. And that kind of tells you where we are. Sometimes we come out and talk about these things and everybody assumes we've done it all. So this is the practical side. No, we haven't done it all. We are implementing in this fall with our first pathway, which includes the foundations, the frameworks course, and then those students will go into statistical reasoning in the winter. So currently on our website, we have the learning outcomes and course outline for the foundations and frameworks courses. The statistics learning outcomes and outline will be up mid-summer at the latest. And we are posting things as we get there. One of the things you can do, and there's information on the slides later, is if you wish, you can sign up for our monthly updates, and then you would know when we post new things. Other thing I want to note for the frameworks course, because of a special grant we got, we're going to be able to just offer the sort of the foundational materials, the skeleton of the materials, as a free and open use resource, and that will be happening this fall. So that'll be something that'll be available for anyone to use. Yes?
I know that in the frameworks, you're trying to get students not only quantitative programming, but have a better idea of their goal. The question is, to what extent are faculty in career programs like health sciences, economics, business, et cetera, involved in the
So she's asking, because the frameworks course has this strong career planning component, how involved are faculty from other departments and programs involved in the teaching or planning? So since we're working on developing materials that can be used anywhere, we are providing sort of the general outline for pieces like that. So there are some pieces you want to do everywhere. You know, if you're talking about malleability of intelligence, every student on every campus should be getting that information in a really good way. So those are places where we build materials that you could just take and you just do that in your classroom. Other things have to be more individualized for the local needs. And so there we try to build sort of, here are the things you should be thinking about in designing this piece of the curriculum, and we strongly suggest you really connect to the people in your programs. So that is something that should be done at the local level to make sure that there is a strong connection to the programs that are offered at the campus. One of the other things that we build into this is when students think about a future career, they shouldn't just be thinking about, well, what am I interested in? Like Uri said, you know, I like to be outside. It should also be, where do you want to live? Are those careers really available in those areas? Is there a good job market? What kind of money do you make? How much debt will you accrue in the process of getting there? So we're trying to help students make more informed decisions. And again, that has to have a strong local base so that, like, if a student really wants to stay in their local community, they need to understand what's available in that community, not something that's going to force them to leave. On the other hand, if they want to leave, they should have that opportunity also. But so that's something that needs to be done at the local level, but we try to offer the supports for it. Leslie?
It sounded like the foundations of mathematical reasoning, you said that was quantitative reasoning. So how is that going to be different than the math 1332?
A level of complexity. So, for example, in the foundations course, we also are really promoting active learning and engagement in the classroom. So students will do a lot of in the classroom problem-solving activities around a topic, but it is fairly discrete. So co-requisite model can take many forms. In some places, the college level course, students are just in the regular college level course, and then they do a form of supplemental instruction, which is more like sort of an intense tutoring situation, but it's required and students have to go on a regular schedule. Other places do it more where it's actually, they are in a developmental course at the same time as the college level course. Now, some models, they just teach the regular developmental course. It's just at the same time. And I have to say, I really don't think that that's a good idea, because the whole concept is that they should be being supported for the college level course. So I know what Susan was talking about, and what we think is a much better model is that the developmental course really needs to be redesigned. First of all, the content should be aligned, and if you're doing a co-requisite with statistics, you're not going to do all the algebra content. And also that a just-in-time approach be considered about, which may mean reorganizing the sequencing of content so that students are receiving the support they need before they need it in the class, but it's close enough that they really get that connection. They understand why I learned this in this class, and it's really going to help me in my statistics class. Did you want to say something?
There are several models that now have independent randomized controlled trial experiments. The best one is probably, the best studies are Peter Adams' beautiful work at the Community College of Baltimore County. That work has evolved in the last 2 years and got much more sophisticated than it was. And we have the first independent results of that.
And that's in English, or writing, right?
That's in English. They really worked out the financial details, the faculty time details, how to add a few hours to particular courses, and mix the students who need support with the regular students in a way that's not stigmatizing. And they're still improving the model, but we have really good data. Boston P College, 4-year, they're an access institution in Tennessee. There's new data that's very strong that shows that by adding 2 hours for certain students and clustering the session directly around the homework and preparation for upcoming classes, dramatically increasing success rates over putting them in a prerequisite. But for students who are a little bit far behind, they fail in these programs. So the hard issue will be, what is the basis of advising decision making? And that's where we need to get better. And people are moving from one cut score, which is bad practice, for the young people to looking at GPA and class rank, if you have that data, and a brief questionnaire on student purposes and intentions. The problem is very many places are not organized, don't have the capacity to use that information. So that's an issue.
We were also designing in, I'm working with our developmental math coordinator, a pathway out in about 3 weeks. If we see that that student is not a good fit for the model,
Yes.
that they can go into the developmental class, and so they don't end up a semester behind.
This, just to mention this, there's a lot of experimentation with this. So about 20% of Fs are students who you know are going to get F in the first week. So more and more places are, rather than trying to prejudge students, doing some basic advising placement, having a first 3-week process where if they're going to fail, they're moved into an intensive boot camp and then a late start class.
Was the late start course the one that they would have started and
Yes.
failed, and then went to the boot camp, and then went into that same course, but
It
it's
starts
now
5 weeks late,
5 weeks
and they have extra hours attached to it.
to the 5
Same content,
extra hours.
yeah, but a really intensive boot camp.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point for us to remember is when we talk about all these different options, I mean, I know I came from a small college, there was just a limit to what you could offer because you never had enough students in these small groups to make it viable to offer a late course because you couldn't get them all in the right block, you know. So there is a real need to think about what's the core principle of the innovation or the intervention, and then how could that be applied in our setting? Because small colleges have a different set of challenges than the very large colleges. And it is never going to be possible for small institutions to offer the same suite of all these different options, but I think it is possible to capture the essential design elements that really make a difference. I did want to mention some of the resources we have available at the Dana Center. So we prepared this new Mathways project implementation guide, which is sort of the first version of everything you might need to think about to implement really big reform at your campus, which means it's a little dense, but I think it's very helpful. And not just, we call it the new Mathways project guide, and it certainly references our project, but I think you could replace that with any kind of the name of your major reform effort and find this a really useful resource, as it may help you think about things you hadn't thought about, and especially about the different aspects of your institution that would be affected by a change. So this is a free resource on the website, and we developed a data-based mobilization workshop. As Uri said, we really strongly believe people need to start with their own data before they just jump in and decide to do something. So this is a service we provide. If you just Google the Charles A. Dana Center or the new Mathways project, you'll end up at our website. Our work is under the higher education. And then under the new Mathways project, if you're interested in seeing some of that information, like the learning outcomes and things, that's under the curricular materials. If you go to Foundations of Mathematical Reasoning, it'll have just that sort of that background information, the learning outcomes, et cetera. But this work is based, again, we didn't really talk about it today, but I mentioned it. It's based on the original work we did with Statway and Quantway. And so and that was open use. These are open use materials. So these are all here on the website, like the actual class materials. Now, we always want to stress to people, this was a very first version. It had not been field tested. So it's rough. You know, it's in that initial draft stage, but we had so many requests for information and just examples and resources that we felt it was really important to put this out there. So feel free to use it, and then our Statway materials, the original versions, again, are under the statistics pathway. So those are things you can look at, and then, as I said, we will keep posting more things with each of the courses as they get developed. And then the implementation guide under the technical assistance. And again, if you kind of go down, there's a couple webinars that we've posted that are about our work. And then the new Mathways project implementation guide is there as one of our free tools. Feel free to contact us. I just want you to know that these things are out there and available, because that's an important part of our job, is providing resources and help for people out in the field.